I started buying this place in about 1965, and from J.W. Neely, and he had 9 kids, and 6 of them were already dead and 3 still living, and that left 24 heirs, and I bought each one out individually for $100 an acre, and it took about 2 years to get it. What it was Dick Hunter, Pop Hunter. He was raised on this farm, and his brother-in-law at work was a supervisor out there. And one day he said, why don't you buy that old J.W. Neely place? And so I said, okay. And right off the bat they said, well, hey, I tried to buy that several times, but they wouldn't sell it to a relative because they was afraid it was going to be oil or something. But they sold it to an outsider, which was me. And I completed it in 1967, and we started building that barn in '69. And we tore down, it was framed from an old milk barn in Dickinson. And we tore it down and brought it up here, and that's what we built it out of. The outside was brand new. It was cedar, and we built that thing by hand. We built it with a handsaw, and about the last day we finished the barn, here comes electricity, but it was too late. So that takes care of buying a farm. And then, of course, it was all grown up. It was grown up in persimmon sprouts and sassafras sprouts, and I cleared it off. After we moved up here, it took me about 2 years to get it all cleaned off, cleared off, and the pasture seeded.
Did you do all the fencing?
We did all the fencing. What I did was I pulled all the wire out of the old fence, and then when the bulldozer came in here to do a little clearing, he cleared the fence row for me all the way around. Made it easier to build the fence.
Okay.
And I always remember one thing, that we was digging those holes, and I put Helen on there to dig the tractor, and says, and doggone it, she got it in the wrong gear. And in a minute, it jumped back and pinned me up against a tree. And I hollered at her. She said, don't you holler at me. But she never got on that tractor again. That was her Denise, I'd set the post, dig the hole, set the post, and Denise would come along and pack the dirt around the post. We went all the way around the place like that. And at one time the fences was in good condition. And since I retired, well, Bruce Richmond has leased it out, and they promised to dig us and it may come later, but they had when oil was about $1.20 a barrel, they had planned to dig a well down there with a pond. But when the crude dropped down, well, they canceled it. But one of these days we're going to have an oil well right down there with a pond.
Okay.
When the crude goes back up a little bit.
So you moved into the barn house in '79?
79.
Mm-hmm.
That was the year that we got flooded in Dickinson, and we was on vacation, and we got the bad news when we was up in Wisconsin, so we cut our vacation short and come on home, and moved.
Okay. When did you start building the underground house?
About March of '83.
Okay. You said you moved in Christmas of '88?
Yeah, moved to Christmas of '88. It took me 5 years to build this thing. And what I did, I had a bulldozer come in and bulldoze a hole out of a hill. And then after I built the house, we covered it back up with the dirt.
So why do you build an underground house?
Because Helen wanted an underground house. So if that's what she wanted, that's what I built. And the way it turned out, it was turned out good because I could take a week off or a day off, and the rain and the weather didn't bother it a bit.
Okay. Did you just come up with an idea of an underground house, or did you see it somewhere, or just?
Well, Helen got to reading these magazines, and then we visited several underground houses, and one of them was over in Lindale, and it was similar to this, and it was one that I could build myself.
Okay. Well, well, we sure enjoy this farm.
Well, maybe someday you'll live on it.
Maybe.
You know, that spatula you had out there, that little wide spatula, I spatulaed this entire inside wall and outside wall with what they call shear wall, and 1/8 inch thick. And I started over on the end there, and I thought, well, it went pretty smooth. And I said, man, if I can just make this smooth all the way through, I won't have to sheetrock it, and I won't have to stipple it. And that's what that is what they call a shear wall. And it's a little old fiberglass is about 3/4 of an inch long, mixed into some kind of a mortar. And it is tough. After one time down on the other end, I run a tractor into that wall, and it just gouged a hole out and didn't crack it or nothing.
Okay. What year did you join the Army?
I joined the Army in November the 7th, 1941.
Okay.
And I was discharged on the 31st of July in 1946.
Okay. What about your Army days? Where did you do basic training?
I got my basic training at Keesler Field, Mississippi.
Okay. And where'd you go from there?
I went from there to Walterboro, South Carolina.
Okay.
And I spent about maybe a month there, and then one night they said, well, get prepared to move out. So we got all of us rigging together, and we ended up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And we always call that a dry run to Myrtle Beach. But one morning, we didn't go back. We went to Walterboro. We went to New York, and that's where we caught our boat to go overseas. And we landed in Birmingham, England. I guess we got on the boat on Mother's Day of I guess 1942, I guess, Mother's Day. And then I was stationed there for 3 years and 9 months.
Okay. What did you do in England?
I was a sheet metal worker. I repaired the airplanes that got damaged. Well, the outside, the skin part, is what I patched and repaired.
Okay.
And it kept us busy.
Now, what did you do the day before D-Day? Tell me about that.
Oh, man, the day before D-Day, we would all out celebrate at the pubs and things. We'd come in at 12 o'clock at night, and that was a curfew. And 12 o'clock, they met us with a paintbrush and a bucket of paint, and we painted the stripes on airplanes. And so we knew there was going to be an invasion that day.
Okay.
And that's when it happened.
Okay.
And I can't even remember exactly when that was.
Okay. So you got discharged from the Army and you came back to Texas City?
I came back to Texas City, and I took a month off, and on the 3rd of September, I went back to work, and that's where I met Helen.
Okay.
She was, they had they didn't have computers and reproducing machines. They had to type everything. And they had about 25 young ladies that was in there typing, and every day they stood up at a plate glass window and watched the men go by going to work. And I looked up and saw this lady in the telephone office. So I wheeled in, and it was Helen. And I had seen her before, but I didn't know who she was, because I worked with her sister, Alice, at the picture show. Alice sold tickets and I sold popcorn. And she was just 11 years old and a little skinny legs. And I always teased her about them little skinny legs she had, so I asked her for a date. Well, I didn't want to miss a bet, so I asked her for a date. And I said, well, you go home and ask Alice, she'll vouch for me. So she went back, and the next day I come back and I said, well, what did Alice say? And she said, don't go out with him, he's too wild. But she went anyway, and we ended up getting married in February the 1st of 1947.
Okay. Now you worked at that picture show when you were pretty young.
I worked all the way through high school, about 3 years through high school.
Okay.
At the pop part, making $5 a week.
Okay, it was enough to get you a car though, wasn't it?
Yeah, I bought me a $50 Chevrolet Coupe. I saved up and got that Chevrolet Coupe for $50.
Okay. Now I've seen a picture of you on an old Indian before. Where'd that come in play?
Oh, well, we had a guy in the Texas City that went into the Coast Guards, and he left it at home with his daddy, and the house was up on stilts, and this old motorcycle was rolled underneath the house. And after he had been gone about a year, well, the daddy sold it to me for $125.
Do you remember what year it was?
1938. It was a 1938 Indian Chief, and that was about 1940, I guess. And I rode it around, and I've always parked it over at Freddie Atwood's house or someplace. I never rode it home. And finally my mother told me, said, son, said, you might as well ride that motorcycle home. Said, I know you got it. You got it, so I started bringing it home.
Now you grew up in Gatesville?
No, I grew up, oh man. I went to 6 different grade schools growing up.
Okay.
When we left Gatesville, Mama got a job with the Singer Company, and we moved to Mahia, Texas, and that was 1933. And I went to 6 different grade schools before I got to high school. Well, in the high school, I was able to go all 4 years at the same place, and that was Texas City.
Do you remember your dad at all?
I don't remember. Well, the only part that I remember about it, my dad was, we had an old collie dog. And, well, my daddy gave me a pocket knife. I wasn't but about 4 years old. He gave me a pocket knife on a string, on a chain. And you hooked that on the belt loop or someplace, and so you wouldn't lose it. Well, for some reason or another, he was wanting to give me a spanking for punish me for something. So I run outside, and that old collie dog put up such a big fight. They wouldn't let him get to me. And the next day they took that dog rabbit hunting, so they said, and that dog never come home.
Okay.
That's the only thing I remember about my dad.
Okay.
And he wanted to buy us a pony before he died, and he bought us a little old paint horse before he died. And of course, Big Daddy finally started working that little old horse, raising horse. And I could ride it to school in nice weather, but if it was raining and bad weather, we had to walk because they were afraid that lightning might strike us.
The horse.
Yeah. But there was one thing that I always remember. There was 2 roads that led up to Plainview School, and one of them was maybe 200 or 300 yards on the other side of us, and and in bad weather they had to send a grader out. Well, they had a grader, and then they had a bulldozer pulling the grader. So there's 2 vehicles. So we could hear that old bulldozer miles away grading the road. So we got dressed and hurried. We'd cross this pasture over to the next road. And when they come by, we'd ride that grader and that bulldozer to school. And there's about 40 kids on that route. And all 40 kids would be riding that grader and bulldozer time they reached schoolhouse.
How did the hunters come into your life?
Well, the oldest daughter was in the same grade as me at school, and I dated her a couple of times, and I went to, they were big dancers and party people, so 2 or 3 times we went out to what they call the Searchlight Inn and dance, and that's the way I met him. And when he come down to, Mama moved back to Gatesville, and I didn't have any place to stay. And Miss Hunter, Mom Hunter, said, well, why don't you come live with me, us? I said, well, okay. So I went to live with them and paid her $1 a day for room and board.
And what year was that?
Well, that was about 1941. Well, it started in 42 when my mama moved back to Gatesville. And it continued on to about 42. Well, I went into service in 41, all right, but let's see. But I paid room and board. I made American Oil. I got a job as a file clerk. I started out as a file clerk in the engineering department, making $15 a week. That's 40 hours for $15. And I paid Mom Hunter $1 a day to stay there. And that made me part of the family. And I did my end of the chores. See, there was 4 kids in that, but a couple of them were kind of small. But the 2 older ones and me, we rotated washing dishes and sweeping the dining room out and cleaning the table and stuff like that. And I always accused her, every time it was my time to wash the dishes, she always cleaned the icebox out. They always got a pretty good kick out of that. And then I went in, we were like to Searchlight Inn, and there was 4 of us guys. And of course, Uncle Sam was pointing, saying, I want you down at the post office, and we decided we'd all go in and volunteer. That was Sunday night, and on Monday, we all went to Galveston and volunteered. Well, one guy was turned down because he already had he had his draft notice, and the other 3 of us went into the Air Force. And we all 3 ended up in Keeslerville, Mississippi, and taking the aptitude test and stuff. They held them the 2 of them back for automobile mechanics, and they sent me as a sheet metal man.
What did Grandmommy think of you enlisting?
She didn't think very much. She said, well, in fact, I've got a letter in there, and I've got to find that letter that she wrote for permission for me to go into the service. And she said, well, we know they need me in, and they know these need soldiers and all that. And I hate to see him go, but it's okay for him to join up. And it's a pretty nice letter, and I've got to locate that because I've almost forgot where it was at.
Was that after Pearl Harbor? Was
Oh.
that after the bombing of Pearl Harbor?
Oh yeah, it was after Pearl Harbor. It was. Well, I went in on November the 7th of 1942, and Pearl Harbor was November the 7th of 41, I think. Well, that just about takes care of me for a good while. I may continue on later on with something to say.
That sounds good to me.
Oh, well, we moved to, I can't remember, we moved to Mahia, and then we moved to, I believe, Jacksonville, and then to Corsicana, and where else? Oh, Alvin. I didn't make it to Alvin because I was at Gatesville bit in the summer, and Mama and them, they moved to Alvin, and then they moved from Alvin to Texas City while I was still at Gatesville.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I can't think of anything else unless you got some
How
questions.
much time did you spend in Gatesville growing up?
About 3 months every year.
Who did you stay with?
Well, Big Mama always wanted me to stay there, but I prefer to stay at Bill's.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a man's work and didn't do it. I took the place of a grown adult, and I wasn't 6 years old when I was running a sulfur rake in a bottom field, driving 2 teams. And one time, and it's a wonder I didn't get killed over it, because that bottom field is about a mile long, and one of the old mares that I was driving broke her bit, and her bit slid back over on her shoulder, and I didn't have any control over her, but I did have control of the horse next to him. So I pulled this big old grove of blood weeds. So I pulled that horse over, and that horse nudged us into those blood weeds, but it didn't slow him down a bit. And it was dumping hay at every windrow. It was dumping that hay, and if I'd have fell down in front of that hay rake, well, that'd been all. And when I got to the other end, Bill run out and waved at him and stopped him. And he said, "Son, why didn't you just turn that thing around and whip that old mare all the way back down to the other end?" I said, "Man, I'm just glad to get off this thing." And then later on, and that's what I did most of the summers, on baling hay, but I did a lot of other work. That big 65 acres up at the house, I helped break that up. And Sonny Gilmer would come, and y'all know Sonny. Sonny's always helping in the kitchen, and I'd help Bill, and Sonny'd help the ladies in the kitchen. And to this day, he's always said, "Sonny, you women go out there and sit on the front porch and gravy, and I'll take care of these dishes. Man, that made me so mad I could die. And you know,
Did he talk about how he met Mom,
huh?
Grandma? Did you tell
Yeah.
about how you met Grandma?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I got that.
And they, that's what the men did after dinner. They all went out on the front porch and laid around and maybe played a little washers and took a nap. And the women, they never got to rest. And just taking, after working in that hay field, and man, you'd get so dirty you just can't imagine. And that's the way you slept, one bath a week. At Big Mama's, the bath was one time a week, and Pearl, they'd take a bath in the kitchen in a number 3 wash tub, and Pearl would get the first bath, and I got the second bath, and Big Mama bathed in that third bath. And same water. I don't know how clean you got, but you got wet anyway. And then at Bill's, Sunday night, we rigged up out at the well, not the well house, but the tank house. We rigged up a shower. So we took us a bath about every night in cold water, man, and it was cold. But at least it was a bath.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. Thank you very much.
Well, I've got one time, Bill always said that Frank Wilson ran a nursery, and said Frank always told him that if you want a watermelon, come over and help yourself. Well, we would go help ourselves to a watermelon, and I knew how to get there. You had to go down and curve around the fences and stuff, and you pass through the peach orchard, and you pass through the cantaloupe patch and stuff. And so one time he had about 6 cousins from I can't even think of the name of the town, come and spent a weekend there fishing at the Leon River. And Bill told me, he said, now son, don't you show them how to get to Frank's watermelon patch. Well, they saw something being taught me into showing them, so I took them to Frank's patch. And man, they got a lot of watermelons. And the next 2 or 3 days later, we was getting ready to come back to the house, and Sonny and I was riding a saddle horse, and well, Bill had said go over and get a watermelon at Frank's place, so we got a watermelon, but we busted it on the way down the bank of the river. So we ate the watermelon and had the cantaloupes, and Sonny and I was riding the saddle horse, and Bill was riding an old mule, and we saw a guy coming across the field. And Bill said, oh, there comes old Frank. And it was old Frank, all right. And he jumped on Bill about watermelons, and Bill said, well, he said, you always told me to go help myself if I wanted a watermelon. He said, yeah, but there's about 25 rhymes on the bank of that watermelon where those guys was camping. And here we was holding those cantaloupes on the off side of where Frank couldn't see them. So after he chewed us out good, well, we went on to the house, but we didn't get there with a watermelon, but we got there with some peaches and cantaloupes.
Okay.
And the penalty for that was that morning we'd been out somewhere on Old Dunny, and I was riding behind Bill, and the dogs scared up a covey of quail, and they just flew right up into a tree. So Bill shot one of them. So that was going, I was gonna get half of it, and he'd get to eat the other half. Well, that night, after showing them guys the watermelon patch, I didn't get any quail.
Okay. Whew, I'm gonna have to set this down. My hand.